beautiful jellyfish, it's Tracy. Hope you guys are all doing well. Thanks so much for joining me on today's deck tech, which is going to be on black-white tokens. Now, originally I was going to do this video, and I actually took the deck apart because I was playing Bloom Titan and I took black-white tokens apart, and then now I'm back to playing black-white tokens because Bloom is frustrating me right now, so I have decided to go back to this deck. For now, until I basically build my next modern deck, which is going to be Modern Elves. That's the next deck that I'm going to be finishing, and we'll kind of just go from there. But at the current moment, I'm back to playing this deck. I have made a couple of changes since I played this deck last. This is my first ever modern deck that I built. I top-aided a PPTQ with this deck. Like I said, there are some changes. I think they're changes for the better. Alright, there are very few things I will claim to know a lot about in the Magic the Gathering community. One of those things I know very well is I know black-white tokens very well, and I'm very confident in my ability to know this deck and to be able to pilot this deck very well because I've been doing it for a very long time. This isn't me being like, I'm just so great at Magic and I just know everything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I know what I'm talking about. I've been playing this deck for a very long time. Anyone who plays the deck for a while hopefully should know the deck really well. And I built this deck, I don't even know how long ago. It was something like 2-3 years ago, something like that. It was one of the, not really one of the first Magic decks I ever built, but I built this mono white originally, and one of my friends was like, hey Tracy, you know like black-white tokens is really big in Modern, right? And I was like, really? I was like, that's really cool. And so I started looking into it a little bit more, and a lot of the cards that I had in the deck, like Intangible Virtue, Spectral Possession, things like that, were in my list. I had a very, like, not that competitive version of a black-white token stack in Modern. So I looked at a couple, I don't really remember how the process came along of me completing this deck and stuff like that, but I've done a lot of research on this deck, and I've seen a lot of different things, and something I think that's really cool about black-white tokens is that, like every other deck, you're going to have a couple of cards that they're going to be very standard. You're going to run Intangible Virtue, you're going to run Lingering Souls, things like that, but you can make this deck your own, which I really like. This is my version of it. This is what I found to be working. Like I said, I have changed a couple cards up that I will talk to you guys about. As always, the deck will be linked down below if you want to follow along and check out all the cards. It'll be on my Tapped Out. Also, a couple of people that I have pulled from inspiration from, a couple people that, if you're interested in building black-white tokens, I would definitely recommend checking out. I will say that Modern is changing, and it kind of always is changing, so something I will say is, like, you know, Craig Wescoe originally built black-white tokens a couple years ago, and the deck looks very different, you know, now and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that Craig Wescoe actually did an updated, you know, his updated black-white tokens list, which I thought was really interesting, from changing from a couple years back and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. He's a person I would look out for. Melissa DeTora has a list. Stanislaw Sivka has a list. I feel like I always say his name wrong, but he's got a list. Oh gosh, who else has a list? Elliot Jones has a list. He was in some Star City GP. He was doing pretty well with that deck. And yeah, like I said, I will talk about a couple of cards that, you know, other people run that I don't run in a little bit. And also there is this Modern Event deck, which has a lot of these cards in it. It goes for, I want to say it's something, it started out MSRP as $75. I don't know if that's still the reality, but that's what it started out as, and it was pretty good. It had a lot of these cards in there. What's going on with there? Okay, but yeah, let's just get into it. So, I'm gonna start doing this deck by CMC, basically, and talk to you guys about each of the cards. So, my deck runs 6 hand disruption spells. It runs 3 Inquisition of Kozilek's and 3 Thoughtseize. And I want to hear a really funny story about how I go into the card store with the intention of getting another Inquisition to 4-run Inquisition and 2-run Thoughtseize, and they didn't have an Inquisition, so I settled for a Thoughtseize, and I was like, I mean, Thoughtseize is always pretty good. So, the whole divide and stuff like that, I've done a whole video talking about Inquisition, talking about Thoughtseize, and basically what, you know, it's all about personal preference, it's all about what you feel comfortable with and stuff like that. Thoughtseize is going to hit more, but it does 2 points of damage, which can potentially be relevant. Inquisition's not going to hit everything, but you don't take damage from it, so there's definitely pros and cons to both. I feel like an even split is pretty nice. A lot of people do 4 and 2. I was actually running 5 before. I actually traded 1 out for a Murderous Cut, which I don't know how I feel about. I'm going to kind of see how these hand disruption spells work. But yeah, Inquisition and Thoughtseize are both really good cards. They're really, really important cards in Modern. If you're running black, you're probably going to be running them simply because it's just really important to see, you know, what cards are going on in your opponent's hands, what threats do you have to look out for, and stuff like that. And the fact that you can take that card away, take away a really big threat, and put it in their graveyard is really, really important. So hand disruption spells are just really, really important. And then I also, in terms of removal, I also run 4 Path to Exiles. Again, this is a very standard card that you're going to see in basically everyone's deck list. If you're running White and Modern, you're probably going to be running Path to Exile. This card's really, really good. It is really just one of the best white removal spells, I would definitely say, in the format. It's very straightforward. It just does whatever, you know, it does exactly what it says. And another thing that's really good is Path to Exile is good in basically every single matchup that you will face, excluding Boggles, because Boggles is like, nope, you can't touch my creature. So every other deck that you play, Path to Exile is going to be good. Every single deck that you play. Even if you're playing against Control and they're just pinging you with a Snapcaster Mage or a Vendilion Click, you're like, nope, those points of damage matter, I'm just gonna get rid of your dude. So yeah, Path to Exile is just really great. And then for the 1-drops, and some people would totally disagree with me on this, but this is a card that I have had a lot of people say they have been very surprised about on my list, and this is a card that's worked out very well for me. And I've been, you know, like I said, I've been playing Black-White Tokens for a while, and this is a card that is really good. It's called Beckett Apparition, and this card looks really not that good. It's kind of one of those cards you're just kind of like, why are you running this card over something else? And hear me out on this. Beckett Apparition is one of those cards that typically comes out in Sideboard, and I will say that this is, when I think about my Sideboard, whenever I think of, I'm like, for the most part, Beckett Apparition is always going to come out. The reason that this card is so good is, one, it's an instant for black or white, which is important, and this deck is mostly white, but I know a lot of other lists you'll have way more black symbols, so it's really nice that you have that option. 2, it's an instant. 3, you get to exile something from a graveyard, which is so important. So someone says, I'm going to play Snapcaster Mage. You ask, what target are you declaring? They say, I'm going to target Lightning Bolt. You say, actually, I'm going to exile your Lightning Bolt from your graveyard. You get a 2/1 vanilla Snapcaster Mage, and I get a token out of it. It is an amazing, amazing card. I have found this card to be so helpful in those instances with Snapcaster Mage, things like that. Even if on turn 1 you don't draw a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition, because you don't really do a lot on turn 1 in this deck in terms of like you putting tokens on the board. It's mostly turn 2, turn 3, things like that. So the fact that you can exile something and you get a token out of it is just really good. I found this card to be really helpful. Back when I was originally playing this deck, I was actually running Doom Travelers when it wasn't as competitive, and I replaced them with Beckett Apparitions. And it's been working out so well for me. Again, we really only run 2 in this deck. Potentially one of these could be replaced for a Murderous Cut, but I'm going to stick to this for now. It's also really good against Molira, by the way, for like comboing off and stuff like that. So you can exile something from the graveyard, which is really good. So, yeah, that's basically it for the 1-drops. Now we're going to talk about the 2-drops. And the 2-drop slot is filled with 4 Raise the Alarms. And Raise the Alarm is really strong because it's, again, it's an instant, which is really important, and you get 2 dudes. The thing about Raise the Alarm is that they don't have flying, which can be a drawback, because the advantage of this deck, of playing this deck, is that it has a lot of flying, and a lot of people just can't deal with that. A lot of people have creatures on the ground, so they have got a Tarmogoyf. That's great. You have these really big tokens, and they have Vigilance, so it's just really good. So Raise the Alarm is a really strong card in this deck. The next card, I have seen very mixed things and very, very mixed numbers on how many to run in this deck, and I'm going to stick with 2 running Zealous Persecution for now. Zealous Persecution is an amazing magic card. It stops Twin, it kills their Pestermite, it stops their Deceiver Exarch for a turn, which hopefully, you know, if you stop their Splinter Twin for a turn, you can draw like something to get rid of their Splinter Twin or whatever, or you can their Deceiver Exarchs are like 0/3s, so it's like you can swing with all those 0/3s that you want. You make infinite tokens, that's great, but they don't do anything, so it stalls Twin for a turn, and then hopefully next turn you can just, you know, swing out and kill them. And Zealous is crazy amazing. It's also just really good. It's a really nice combat trick. It's definitely one of those cards that you want to be looking out for if you're playing against this deck, because if they have a black and a white mana open, you're going to be a little bit concerned. How much damage can you block and stuff like that? How much damage can you afford to take without dying if they have a Zealous Persecution in their hand? So it's a really, really cool combat trick. And it kills a lot of things. It kills a lot of things with 1 toughness, and it's just really good. So I am a huge fan of Zealous Persecution. I think that it is definitely needed in this list. And then the deck 3 runs Honor of the Pure, and this is just a really awesome anthem. It gives all your white dudes +1/+1. The deck lists that run more Sorin Solemn Visitors stay away from Honor of the Pure, but the deck lists that only run like 2 or 1 Sorin Solemn Visitor, you're gonna see a couple of these. I 3-run this card, and it's really good. But now this is a segue into the point, which is the all-star card, by far the best card in this deck, and that is Intangible Virtue. This card is absolutely amazing, and the reason why this card is so good is because for 1 mana, theoretically, you give your creatures +1/+1, which is amazing. And then for 1 other mana, you give your creatures Vigilance. It is just amazing how great this magic card is, because it just does everything you want it to. People just can't deal with it. You have really no consequences to not swing. You basically just swing, and then you can keep your dudes up as blockers. And if they swing in with their Tarmogoyf, you could, divvy up the points of damage and you could potentially kill it, or you can just block it with a token and then you just swing, with flying in the air. This is an all-star card in this deck. I said this before when I did a video back on this guy who was running black-white tokens. He said he didn't run Intangible Virtues. I completely disagree with that. This card is absolutely essential. You can do whatever you want with this deck. Please, please, please 4-run Intangible Virtue. You will not regret it. This card is actually amazing. So, Intangible Virtue is really good. Then we're gonna talk about the 3-drop slot, and this is where the prime token gen really does show. And it 4-runs Lingering Souls, and Lingering Souls is amazing because what's really nice about this card is that you cast it on turn 3, right? And you get 2 dudes, and then on turn 4 you flash it back, and then you also play a Zealous Persecution, or an Intangible Virtue, or an Honor of the Pure, so that having like that flashback for 2 is really, really important. Or it's really nice late game when you top deck Lingering Souls, because you're like, for 5 mana, I just make 4 dudes, and then if you have Intangible Virtue out, that's 8 points of flying damage that they have to deal with. If they can't deal with that, they're really not in a good spot. So Lingering Souls is also used in Abzan in Modern, and for good reason, because that card is just really, really amazing. Another card that this deck runs, and I actually have not seen this on a lot of people's lists, but Midnight Haunting. I really like this card a lot. I like the instant speed token gen. Don't get me wrong, having sorcery ones are fine too, but I do like having that instant speed thing, especially if they don't expect this card simply because it's not on a lot of people's lists, which is why I like having it in mind, because someone says, they expect like a Raise the Alarm, so they may swing in with their flying dude, and you're like, actually I'm gonna flash in Midnight Haunting, and I'm gonna get 2 dudes so I can block and stuff like that. So it's a really, really cool combat trick, and I just really like Midnight Haunting a lot. And then the deck 4-runs Spectral Procession, and this card is really important because it's basically you pay 3 mana to get 3 dudes. Very, very straightforward. And something else I do like about this card is that you can pay 2 colorless, which is really important for those things. So say, for example, you have a really interesting mana base and stuff like that. The deck does run, a couple of colorless lands and stuff, so if you can't afford to run, if you can't afford to like get that white mana, which isn't really super hard with this deck, but if you're having a hard time with it, having the chance to do that I think is really important. So Spectral Procession is really good. And then we get into pretty much the all-star card of this deck, and that is Sorin Solemn Visitor. And people just don't have good answers to Sorin because he synergizes way too amazingly with Intangible Virtue, because you swing out with your dudes, they get a buff, they get lifelink, and then those tokens that you make serve to protect Sorin. They swing at, they swing a Tarmogoyf at Sorin. You just block it with a token. You get rid of a token, but you don't care because you keep Sorin alive. Sorin is primarily used for his +1 and then his ult. His ult is very devastating to a lot of different decks, basically, that are creature-based, that are running creatures. I have gotten Sorin's ult off before, and I was playing against someone, and the person next to them was like, why don't you just scoop up your cards? Like, she just ulted Sorin. Like, you're not gonna win. It was against a Boggles deck. In his defense, I mean, he misplayed. He didn't play another creature, so he had to sacrifice his one dude, so, like, you know, that was the thing. But Sorin is just absolutely amazing. In a deck like this, which is very, it's a very low mana cost deck, as it has to be because it's modern, it's a very quick format. Sorin is a really nice bomb to have in the deck. Another thing I really like about Sorin too is the fact that his -2 gives you a token, which is really good. Yes, it does not get the buff off of Honor of the Peer, but you don't really care at that point because you're going to get 2/2 flyer, which is really important. So for some reason, if you just don't have a board or anything like that and you top deck Sorin, you can make a dude. The dude can protect Sorin, or you can get in with points of damage, and then you can plus it and you can gain lifelink and stuff. Something that's also really important to note about Sorin is his +1 says until the end of your until your next turn. This is extraordinarily important, and a lot of people misread this card, and it is very important to know what Sorin's +1 does for you as well as for your opponent, because a lot of people forget this detail and they go to swing at Sorin and you're like, I'm gonna block with my token and gain the life back and then potentially kill your dude, and then, you know, I just get life out of it, which is really good. So Sorin is just really, really amazing. Like, everything about this card is just fantastic. It is amazing in this deck. I know of some decks that will 4-run this card. I'm going to stick with 2. I think that 2 is a really good number. I could potentially even get away with 3, but I found that 2 has been pretty okay, and he's just amazing. He's just an all-star card in this deck, and if you're building black-white tokens, I'm going to strongly, strongly advise you to run Sorin, because he's just so good. Okay, now we're going to talk about the mana base in this deck. This deck runs 22 lands, and I changed up the mana base a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have any fetch lands, which makes me really sad. Funny story, I actually traded away my black-white fetch lands to trade for Mutavaults for Merfolk, and then I decided the next day not to build Merfolk, so now I'm just stuck with Mutavaults. That's really awkward. So basically, I don't have any more Marsh Flats, which is really unfortunate, but in an ideal world, you would want to be running 4 Marsh Flats, because that thins through your deck, it gets you your colors and things like that. I'm gonna be okay without having those. When I built this deck and stuff like that, when I top 8'd the PPTQ, I only had 1 Marsh Flat. So realistically, is it the biggest end of the world thing that I don't have them? Not really. Would I love to have them? Yeah, absolutely, but they're also $35, and I'm not going to blow, I can't do that math right now. 140? The 140? Yeah, 35 plus 35 is 70. Wow, look at that. I just did that math in my head. Cool. I'm not blowing $140 on fetch lands. I'm just not doing it. Do you understand that that's basically like a Tarmogoyf? Like, come on. I want Tarmogoyfs. I need Tarmogoyfs. Do I need Tarmogoyfs? I don't know. Probably. I probably do. I really need Snapcaster Mages. That's what I need. Okay, not the point. So basically, what this deck is doing for its mana base is, without the Marsh Flats, is it's 3-running Windburst Kites. You will see a lot of lists that 4-run this card. I have stuck to 2 to 3 in my build, and the reason for that is because this card comes in tapped. And, I think that is a potential flaw in this card, and it's that it is on the slower side. But Windburst Kites is amazing. It is just a great card. Like, if you're building this deck, you're gonna want Windburst Kites on there, simply because you pay 1 mana to tap it, and you basically get something under, you know, you get value out of it, because, like, getting a Sorin under a Windburst Kites is like the best thing ever to do. Because, yeah, they don't, you know, they don't get, like, any of the buffs or anything like that, but what's really awesome is that if you get Sorin, you can uptick him, and then you get lifelink, and you have Vigilance from Intangible Virtue, and then you have lifelink, so if they want to swing at you or they want to swing at Sorin, they have a really good time getting through my lifelink wall, basically, of tokens, so that's really cool. So Windburst Kites is really awesome. You usually get a lot of value out of it. It's just a really good card. You know, it's really awkward when you get a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition under there. That's not something that you want to be getting. You want to be getting Token Gen, and you want to be getting your Anthems or Sorin under there, ideally. Or even, you know, Path is really awkward. It's definitely a really awkward card, because what if for some reason they just don't have a creature on board? You just wipe their board, or they're playing control and they don't run a lot of creatures, or something like that. So, Windburst Kites is just a really important card in this deck, and I like it a lot. And I have one lone swamp in this deck. I actually did change this. I originally was not running any basic lands, but with the minus of the marsh flats, I really wanted to have just a swamp. Something that's also really nice about a swamp running a swamp too is that if you have it in your opening hand, you can do swamp, Inquisition, swamp, Thoughtseize, which is really good because the only other way I can do an Inquisition or Thoughtseize on turn 1 is if I have to shock myself with Godless Shrine. So I think it's really important to have that that swamp in there. We'll see how that works out. And then the deck is running 8 planes in the deck, which is really good. So yeah, Blood Moon not super good against this deck because it does run a lot of basic lands. And then it runs 2 Vault of the Archangels, and I really like Vault a lot because it's a really nice thing to do when you have mana and you don't know what to do with it. Because a lot of times this deck, if you're playing a longer, grindier game, you're kind of just like, this is really awkward right now because I have nothing to do with my mana. So it's really nice when you have something to do, and it's something very relevant like Death Touch and Lifelink, which Death Touch is going to kill a lot of their creatures, and Lifelink just gains you life, which is really good. So it's a really nice card to have. I would not personally run more than 2, that's just me though, because it is a colorless land, excuse me. So, I would not, because this card is very awkward to top deck when you really need another white source for Spectral Procession or something like that, so that's my reasoning for only 2 running this card. And then the deck 3 runs Godless Shrines. I don't honestly know why I never picked up a 4th Godless Shrine. I don't remember. I think that thought that I would be okay with just 3 running this card. Again, in an ideal world, having another Godless Shrine would probably be really helpful, though it does depend on your mana base and stuff like that. My deck is in primarily white. A lot of other versions of this deck you'll see have a lot more black in them, so 4 running Godless Shrine would probably be ideal, but I just don't have another Godless Shrine, and I mean, if I got one, I should actually ask one of my friends if he has one, because that would be really nice if I got another Godless Shrine, but, and then the deck, 4 runs the Buddy Land, which is, Isolated Chapel, and Buddy Lands are really great. I like them a lot, and I do like how the deck has, more basic lands than I did last time, because now I have a lot of times this card is going to come in untapped, which is really important, so I can, you know, cast my spells sooner. And the deck runs 1 Ghost Quarter in the main. I originally was doing 2, and that was not good. It was just too much, and I wasn't getting a lot of value in a sense out of it. And I was originally going to do this in Sideboard, but I actually don't have, I don't really have room in my Sideboard, and I really like the addition of a Ghost Quarter for so many matchups. A Ghost Quarter is just one of my favorite cards because I like it better than Tech Edge, because a lot of times your games just go by so quick and they don't even get 4 lands on the board, and you really need to get rid of a land or something like that. You know, Modern is a format where people are going to be running a lot of shocklands, people are going to be running a lot of special lands, going to get rid of the Gavany Township, get rid of the bounce land if you're playing against Bloom, like, so many different things. This card's just going to do a lot of different things for you, so I really like it in the addition of the main board. Yeah, that's pretty much the mana base. That's pretty much the deck. Now we're going to talk about Sideboard, and I actually changed Sideboard up quite a bit from when I last had the deck. And the main reason that I put Beside You, Shelter's All on my Bloom Sideboard was because if I was playing against, you know, I was playing against a control deck, I really wanted to Entwine Tooth and Nail, and I couldn't do that if I was playing against control and they were just going to counter it, because 9 mana is a lot, and if they just remand it, I just like waste 9 mana and it goes back to my hand, it's awkward, I can't do anything for the rest of the turn basically. So I had that in my sideboard, and the times that I got it, it was helpful and stuff like that, but I was thinking about it, like when I took apart Bloom, I was like, I don't really have a use for this card, so I was like, I'll throw it in black-white tokens, because this deck is so much about instants and sorceries, basically. And the fact is if I'm playing against a control matchup, that 2 life that I use, I don't really care about that too much at all, so I think that's going to be really, really important. So, we'll see how this card works out. I'm really intrigued to see how that, how it works, so, cool. And then I have a Slaughter Pact in the side, and I know when a lot of people talk about black removal, they talk about Murderous Cut and Dismember. I really like Slaughter Pact a lot because people don't see it coming. People, like, you just play Slaughter Pact and you're tapped out and they're like, man, I'm gonna go for my Splinter Twin combo, you can't do anything, and then they do Splinter Twin and then you're like, Slaughter Pact did, and I've gotten pretty good with paying for my packs because I've been playing Bloom for a bit, so like that's not really going to be a huge issue. So I really like Slaughter Pact a lot. Is it like an absolute essential, like, you know, you should definitely run it in your sideboard and stuff like that? I mean, it may not be good in every matchup, but I really like Slaughter Pact a lot. And then it runs 2 Sundering Growths, and I have seen a lot of different people talk about artifact and enchantment removal in this deck. I by far think that Sundering Growth is the best because it's double white mana, which can potentially be hard in a lot of different decks to pull off, but my deck is primarily white, so I don't have that issue. And the fact that it's instant speed, it's destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you get to populate for 2 mana is absolutely amazing. It is just... it's an all-star card, basically. Just the card doesn't have drawbacks for the most part, so it's just really good. I like that card a lot. And then I have Spellskite. Now, I was talking a little bit earlier about Boggles, and how Boggles, like, Path to Exile is just an all-star card in every matchup except for that card. Spellskite is a fantastic card, and I just want to play against Boggles and use Spellskite because it's like, oh, that's a very nice thing that you got there. Well, guess what? My Spellskite gets it instead. So it's just really good. You know, obviously the deck does not have blue mana. Paying that 2 life so that you can stop them from doing whatever it is that they're doing, you don't really care too much about that at all. So Spellskite's really good. Spellskite is definitely just, in my opinion, just such an all-star card in so many different sideboards. Like, it's kind of one of those cards that, you know, if you're not sure another thing to put in your sideboard, I would just recommend Spellskite. It's going to be used in so many different matchups, anything that has a removal, and yeah. Then we have Stony Silence. This card is absolutely amazing. Really shuts down Affinity. This deck has a great Affinity matchup, by the way. Fantastic Affinity matchup to begin with, but this card is really helpful. It's also really helpful if you're playing against Tron. They can't activate their mana rocks and stuff like that, which makes them really sad, so they can't, you know, they go at a much slower rate, so, and I think this deck has a very bad Tron matchup. Yeah, it has a bad Tron matchup because Ugin and you cry a little bit, but, then we have by far the best card of my sideboard, and that is Rest in Peace. When I went to the PPTQ, I cannot tell you how many games this card was useful, and Rest in Peace is fantastic because this card is just kind of like, it hurts you a little bit in terms of Beckon Apparition and Lingering Souls, but you're choosing to either get those tokens, or shut down their deck. I really would personally like to shut down their deck versus getting a couple of tokens. So Rest in Peace is just really good. And even if you still have, you know, your 2 Lingering Souls or whatever on the side, in the main board, and you still get 2 spirits out of it, and then you just can't flash it back. So still, Rest in Peace is just really good. It's like having some sort of artifact, having some sort of graveyard hate in your sideboard is, again, a really important thing. I would definitely really recommend it in Modern because so many decks are going to be running things and you're just like, nope, I don't like it. This card shuts down so many people. Speaking of Timely Reinforcements, I've got 2 Timely Reinforcements. Definitely a sideboard card. I would absolutely 100% not mainboard this card. I completely disagree whenever I see this card mainboarded. I think that it's not a good idea to mainboard this card because it can just be completely useless in some matchups. I think that there's also a lot of other cards in your 3 mana drop slot, and this card would replace a Spectral Procession in that sense, or a Midnight Haunting or something like that. So Timely Reinforcements is just really good. It's really good against like the Mirror Match or something like that, and overall this card is just really good. And then the card has 2 Leyline of Sanctities, and I originally didn't have this in my sideboard at all, but again, having them from Bloom, I just brought them over here, and this is a burn player's worst nightmare. They hate this card because they're basically like, I can't do anything to you. I have to do everything through creatures. And that deck runs like Goblin Guides and Monastery Swift Spears, and your deck doesn't care about those things, really, because you just have so many dudes that, you know, you can just block their stuff. So this deck is a very difficult burn matchup, and Leyline just kind of says no to that, so that's really good. And similarly, for burn, and in other decks too, for like Jund, for example, Celestial Purge. I really like Celestial Purge. It's used in a lot of different matchups. I like how flexible this card is because it's good in burn. It's good in Jund, especially because they have black and red stuff, which is really important. Actually, I'm trying to think what in Jund has red permanents, because they do Terminate and Lightning Bolt. I can't think of any like red permanents. Do they run Grim Lavamancer in that deck? No, I don't think so. I don't know. In my head, never mind. They don't have red permanents in the deck as far as I can think. Oh, I mean, actually, I guess if they do they put Blood Moon inside? I'm totally forgetting everything about a Gen deck right now. But anyways, yeah, this card is just really good because it's exile, which is just really important, so it can't get anything back. It's used in a lot of different matchups. It's just really good. I like the flexibility of this card a lot. So yeah guys, that was pretty much it. Just something I want to say about black-white tokens that I definitely think is a huge advantage of this deck, is whenever I play against other people who, you know, you just have an overwhelming amount of tokens, a lot of times people say to me, it never feels good like casting a lightning bolt against a token, because they lightning bolt a token and you've got like 3 more to deal with, and they probably have some sort of buff from one of your anthems in the deck, so it's just not an ideal thing. So this deck makes removal for your opponents very difficult. If they have any sort of board wipe, your deck suffers definitely. However, what's really awesome about if they cast that, like, say on their turn they cast a Damnation or something like that, at the end, so they waste 4 mana doing that, then at the end of their turn, you can play Midnight Haunting, you can play not Rest in Peace, you can play, not Lingering Souls, what is the 2 mana one, Raise the Alarm. You can cast those sort of things, which I really like, because they wipe the board, they waste their mana, end of turn you do that, and then you top deck an Intangible Virtue or something like that, and then you just swing. So it's really, really good in terms of, like, getting around a lot of removal. It's just really good, and yeah, I think that's definitely a really big advantage of this deck, is it really hurts those decks who don't have a giant board wipe, because then they have to just waste all their spells killing your tokens, or deciding, can I burn out their face, or can I just afford to, like, get rid of their, you know, deal with their board and stuff and get rid of all those flyers. And like I said, a lot of decks don't have really good answers to flying. A lot of decks just have things on the ground. They have a Siege Rhino, that's absolutely great. I have like 8 2/2 tokens. What are you gonna do about that, Abzan? Like, you know, something like that. So, yeah, it's definitely a really, really huge advantage. And the life gain is too really relevant. You don't always get it off, and it's not always relevant, obviously. You know, life totals just don't matter in some games, but having something like Sorin Solemn Visitor and then having something like Vault of the Archangel is really important. So overall, I think this deck is really sweet. It's definitely a good deck. It's good against a lot of really fair decks, I think, in Modern, and I think it has definitely a lot of advantages. And, you know, like every, you know, deck, it's gonna have bad matchups and stuff like that, but that's just kind of a part of the game. I think that it has a lot of really good matchups. Something like Affinity has a great Affinity matchup, which is really awesome, because Affinity has flyers, and that's great. I'm just gonna block your 21 Vault Scourge with a 1/1 token, and then it kills it, and it's like, yeah, you gain 20 life, but like, I just killed your 21, so, yeah. Anyways, that's it. Let me know your feedback and stuff like that below. Black-white tokens is pretty great, so, yeah, that's it. Talk to you guys later. Bye.